I want to talk a little bit about a newspaper that I have long thought was a pretty decent newspaper compared to others in this country. But this video is somewhat critical of it. The paper I'm referring to is the Independent, or more precisely the Eye. This is it. I'm not specifically talking about this version, this edition, but this is about a subject that I've covered in a number of my videos, and yeah. So basically, in their online edition on Facebook, it seems these days almost every other post is about an issue impacting women, about an issue of equality regarding women, or an issue to do with women's rights. Now, I really don't have any problem with this on the surface. I think that most of the things that they are covering are, but not everything, are legitimate issues, or newsworthy issues, and the things that should be spoken about and covered. The latest one, for example, is about street harassment. But I'm starting to think that this is going beyond just being a responsible newspaper and promoting things that are newsworthy to being a pretty much hardcore feminist agenda. Now, let me try and explain what I mean by this. The reason I say it's a hardcore feminist agenda is because whilst they are making a lot of reports about women's issues, they're seemingly completely ignoring and whitewashing issues that predominantly impact men. And it's something that I've long been concerned about with the media. It is absolutely indisputable that issues that predominantly impact men are not discussed anywhere near as much as issues that impact women. That is indisputable. And there's this false perception promoted by the feminist movement that basically women are all victims and men are all princes of privilege. And it's this false dichotomy that basically only women are victims, only women are capable, only women have issues that impact them. I think it's profoundly sexist, and it's an insinuation. It's patronising to women, and it's just bullshit, quite frankly. And I'm a little bit sick of it. When I say that there's issues that predominantly impact men, some of the things I'm talking about is homelessness. If you go into any homeless centre, the vast majority of people there will be men. If you look on the street, people sleeping rough, the vast majority are men. I'm not saying women don't also suffer from homelessness, and it's a terrible thing regardless of, I take a universalist approach. I have compassion for all homeless people, but it is an issue that does seem to impact men a lot more than women. So that needs to be explored, that specific issue. Male suicide rates are higher. Now apparently women are likely to attempt suicide more, but men go through with it more. That's obviously something that needs to be explored. Male life expectancy is shorter. That needs to be explored. There's a wide range of issues that predominantly impact men that I believe are whitewashed, or if the issues are covered, it's not from a gender perspective, it's just because of the wider issue. And that's fine, but then you can make the same argument for some of the issues that supposedly impact just women. I mean, something like sexual harassment, okay, maybe the majority of victims are women, but that doesn't mean you don't get examples of female stalkers, because you do. The problem I have with this is it sends out this sort of feminist propaganda that only women are victims. And I think that's damaging and divisive, because it then turns women against men. It divides society. It turns men into the guilty and women into the victims, and it's a misleading thing. Because something, for example, like street harassment, yes, there are some guys out there who have a very bad attitude and they think that they can make a woman feel uncomfortable. And I don't really go along with the idea that wolf whistling and that sort of thing is harmless. If a woman has to put up with it every single day, then it can be stressful, it can be, but it's more than that, and I fully accept that it is a damaging thing. So this isn't a case of disputing the issues that are brought about. There's other issues that impact women. For example, it is true that women get paid less than men. That's unfair. And there's other issues that predominantly impact women. And I've no problem with those issues being covered. No problem at all. I just cannot stand the hypocrisy of large segments of the media, and it isn't just left-wing papers like the Eye, it's the press as a whole. And I am a little bit fed up with it. And I'm starting to think in recent months, I mean, the Independent's always been a left-wing paper, but these feminist overtones have been particularly strong in recent months, and I do wonder, is there something going on at the top? Is there some sort of, frankly, feminist agenda? Because it's not a case of just reporting important issues. If they were doing that, then they would also be reporting the issues that I'm talking about. But they're not. That makes me wonder, is there an agenda here? And I know that will be a controversial statement. You know, people who read the paper would say that I'm an idiot, or that I'm a misogynist, because that is the usual way to shout down anyone who questions the feminist movement, is to vilify them as a woman hater and this sort of thing. But I think the questions that I'm raising are legitimate. Why is it that only women's issues are covered by the media? It's clearly unfair. And this isn't a sort of childish attitude like, oh, the girls get covered, so should us boys. It's about the fact that there are men suffering out there from a variety of issues, and their situation is completely ignored. I think that's an absolute abomination. And as a man, it does anger me, because I sympathise with my fellow men. I've said time and time again, I have no problems with women's issues being covered. I just cannot tolerate the hypocrisy of sending out this message that only women have issues worth covering. I mean, that's just totally misleading. And papers like the Eye are largely responsible for this, for sending out these sort of messages. So I really wouldn't have a problem with them covering if they just balanced it out a bit and also reported on things that predominantly impact men. So why are they refusing to do that? I wrote to them a while back bringing up this issue, and because this was the time when it was, I probably made a video about it at the time, about the issue of women ministers, and the fact that there's a huge issue made over that, and yet actually they just represent a very small body of people in a country of 65 million. You cannot take as a barometer for the whole nation the cabinet. It's a small group of people. You cannot use that. Yes, they're in a position of power, but you know, that's like saying it would be basically the same as trying to compare an average citizen to the Olympic team. It's a stupid comparison. It's better to look at wider society. And this notion that feminists put out, that men are princes of privilege and women are downtrodden, is frankly a lot of crap. Yes, women face issues that men don't face. But I have news for you, feminists. Men face issues that women don't face. It works both ways. But because they're so full of spite and ignorance, they won't even... Any man who mentions these issues is shouted down. And it's just a very unfortunate situation, because it makes debate very difficult. It makes even talking about these things very difficult, because it's an atmosphere whereby if you dare say anything, you're automatically stigmatized as being a misogynist or a woman hater. I've had one extremist claim that, why don't just come out and say you're against feminism? Well, I'm not against feminism as a whole, but am I against that sort of feminism? Hell yes. Hell yes. I'm against any sort of mentality that says agree with us or else. And as far as I'm concerned, that sort of feminism is no better than fascism or communism, in the sense it forces people to conform. It's basically an idea of agree with us or else. So this idea that it's all about equality, in my opinion, is used as a cover. I'm not saying all feminists are like that. I believe there's feminists out there who are decent women and men who do just want to push for women's rights, and that's fine. Although I would say they need to prove that they're about equality and also speak about men's rights. So I'm not saying that I'm not one of these people that say, oh, all feminists hate men. But I do think as a movement, it is incredibly divisive. And it is this sort of misleading rhetoric. And, you know, papers like The Independent are largely responsible for this, for pushing the sort of feminist language that divides society. Things like, women still have it hard. I'll find a headline directly here. I'm on Facebook. I'll try and give an exact quotation to tell you what I'm talking about, to refer to what I'm talking about. Incidentally, I found out, and this isn't really related, but it is an interesting statistic. The Independent Online actually has more subscribers than what the Sun has. Now that's very interesting because their print editions have far, far less. I mean, the Independent's like 200,000 or 300,000 a day. The Sun is 2.5 million, something like that. Anyway, that's off topic, but anyway, my apologies, I can't find it right off the top of my head. But if you look at the Independent, if you follow it regularly, I think if you're an open-minded person, you'll see where I'm coming from. It seems every other day they have at least one issue talking about women's rights, and that's fine. I just wish they would balance it out just a little bit and talk about, for example, they've been running a series on World War I, to their credit. I'll give them credit for that. But why not then have an article about the fact that young men were sacrificed overwhelmingly in that conflict? They've got extracts from the war, like diary entries and so on, and that's good. I give them credit for that. But why not have an article about, whilst Emmeline Pankhurst was demanding women's suffrage, and other suffragettes were doing that, young men were being forced to die or branded cards by the White Feather campaign. You know, it's something that's often overlooked. When feminists talk about male privilege, they conveniently ignore that fact. It wasn't millions of women who were blown apart in the trenches. And, of course, it's not a fault of feminism, but when feminists say, when they talk about male privilege, this is actually a distortion of history, because they're going solely on issues like land ownership and voting. They're not looking at the many, many, many circumstances where men had a unique burden. And I think that's just, it's shameful, quite honestly, because it is a glaring insult to millions of human beings who suffered. It's just callously ignoring that. So I get really frustrated when I hear feminists talk about, oh, men have had their way throughout history. It's a lot of crap. A minority of men have had their way throughout history. Let's just drop this idea of, this false, misleading idea of male privilege, because it is one of the most common ways that feminists promote anti-male propaganda, by saying that guys have it all good, women are downtrodden. Now, no doubt they'll throw out lots of examples where women are downtrodden. And I've said time and time again, I fully acknowledge that there are situations that women suffer. But the difference between what I am trying to argue and what militant feminists say is their attitude is completely black and white. Women are victims, men are oppressors, full stop. They cannot comprehend for a second that men also suffer, and there's certain issues that impact men. And I think that's just, it's infantile, but it's also callous and cold-blooded to have such contempt for human suffering. That would be just as bad as certain men who would claim that women never suffer, which is also a lot of crap. Of course women suffer, and of course there's issues that impact women. I just hate this divisive, bitter agenda that feminists have, which, it's not based on equality. Let's get real. The real issue here is divisiveness and trying to stir up constant negativity towards men, and I am so sick of it. I am so sick of it. If you're a true egalitarian, you will recognize that women's issues exist, but you will also recognize that there are issues that uniquely impact men as well, or overwhelmingly impact men, and you would recognize that both male issues and female issues need to be discussed. And at the moment, sadly, we have a situation where men's issues are massively overlooked in this country. Massively. And I just think it's very unfortunate. And this has nothing to do with being bitter towards women. I love women. Many of my friends are women. This is nothing against women. but it is frustration with what the feminist movement does. And I guess, okay, I'm having a rant, but I am frustrated. I'm frustrated that papers like I continue to promote this divisive agenda by only focusing on women's issues. It's wrong. And it's also unprofessional, for the record.